Welcome to another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler. My guest on today's podcast is my friend Jacob Graf. Welcome to the podcast, Jacob.
Howdy. Happy to be here.
Tell everybody how to spell your last name.
Graf, as in Frank.
And tell our listeners the background behind that name. Is there, because most Grafs are Graff.
Yeah. As far as I understand, we spell it like most people typically did in German and Swiss Europe. So
that's great.
Yeah, we have a pretty typical spelling of the last name as far as I understand.
So everybody else is untypical.
It's everyone else who
gone
actually
astray.
Yes, exactly.
Well, there you go.
They're the ones who all changed their name incorrectly.
If there's any Grafs living with 2F, you can message Jake and you can have an offline discussion about this.
No.
Just by way of introduction, Jacob is 26 years old. He is a returned missionary. He is gay. He has stepped away from full activity in the church. We'll talk more about that. He has a great professional career underway. He's worked at a company called Divvy, D-I-V-V-Y, high-tech company here in Utah County, Salt Lake County.
Mm-hmm.
He has a leadership role there. He's the director of product
operations.
Mm-hmm. So this will be a podcast of Jacob telling his story of coming out gay, how he knew he was gay, when he knew he was gay, some of the theories that people presented to him, why he was gay and how he worked through those, his relationship with his family. He's the oldest of 6, has active LDS parents. That'll be a lot of the story. We'll also talk about potentially just, any suggestions he has to YSA leaders as they're supporting their LGBTQ members, and talk about his role at Divvy and just how he is being received there as a gay worker, which is great, and his relationship with the CEO and his fellow workers and the other LGBTQ people at Divvy, and how that is just such a great space for him. And when I hear that, it makes me happy. It's an improvement in our society that everybody feels welcome at work and people are being promoted based on their abilities to contribute versus any other attribute. Whenever I do a podcast with someone that stepped away from the church, sometimes people ask me, why would you tell that story? And this is a podcast I've wanted to tell all stories as long as the guest is respectful of the church, which Jacob is. Yeah, I'd always invite someone like Jacob, if I were his YSA bishop, to follow the teachings of the church. Everything good in my life has come from following the teachings of the church, and I invite everybody to do that. But as a YSA bishop, I had YSAs that they just didn't feel that was their path to fully participate in the church. And I would just say, I'll walk with you. I want to be involved in your lives. My role in your life is not conditional on full church activity, and I want to be there to walk with you on the road that you feel is best. I'm not going to invite someone to go down a road different than the church teachings, but if they self-determine that's their road, then I'll walk with them. And so that's what we're kind of doing with Jacob. Neither of us are inviting others to follow Jacob's path, but I think it's helpful just to hear Jacob's story and how he's navigating this really difficult road in a very thoughtful way. Jacob offered a great prayer before we went live. Sometimes we tape those prayers as part of the podcast. Just a great spirit about Jacob. One of the talks that resonate with me when I meet somebody that stepped away is Elder Ballard's talk in November 2017 at BYU. And the question is, to family and friends who are less active, Elder Ballard encouraged listeners to love them. And this is his quote: "Please don't preach to them. Your family member or friend already knows the church teachings. They don't need another lecture. What they need, what we all need, is love and understanding, not judging. Share your positive experiences of living the gospel." So maybe that's an umbrella statement for this podcast. And just thank you, our listeners, for being willing to hear Jacob's story. Jacob reached out to me on Twitter 2 years ago, and we met, and I just felt a great man doing really wonderful things in his life, and it's fun to reconnect with him, and we've had a good catch-up before we went live. Anything I've said so far that you want to clarify, or are you okay with that? Just share with our listeners.
No, yeah, I think that we're in a good place to get started and start chatting here. I'm excited to talk a little bit more about my story and where I'm at.
Tell us, just growing up, where did you grow up, Jacob, and when did you sort of realize that you might be gay?
Yeah, so I grew up in St. George, Utah. Wonderful parents, wonderful siblings. I'm the oldest of 6. We span about 10 years, so I'm 26 at the moment. My youngest sister is 16, and we are kind of all in between there, 3 boys and 3 girls, and we have a great time. Growing up, I never really used the title of gay. I would say that I noticed that I was attracted to men at a pretty young age, probably around 10, 11, 12-ish, and noticed throughout that time that attraction was there. One of the interesting things about my upbringing, though, was that the predominant belief in my family was that homosexuality was caused by possession. And while that on the surface has a lot of issues related to it, obviously, I think that one of the things at its core that it did and that it caused was this idea that being gay is not you. It is an external force that is causing you to experience these feelings or these attractions and all of those aspects. And
just tell our listeners more about possession. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the idea being possession of an evil spirit, something that is this external force from an unseen world that is tempting you and causing you to feel and experience these feelings. And it, obviously there's a lot of examples in the scriptures of people talking about evil spirits and different things like that, but in this specific instance, the idea was pervade that homosexuality was caused by possession of some type of external evil spirit, tempting you and controlling you in a way that caused you to have these feelings and temptations, quote unquote, about this. And so, yes, that has a lot of issues, I would say, on the surface, obviously, and working through that mentality for myself is something I'll talk about in a little bit. But at its core, the idea that causes is that it's not you, that it's something that just happens to you, and that it's something you can overcome. And so for years, all through my teenage years, all through high school, even all through my mission, it was not something that really, the idea that Jacob is gay never really even came into my head, honestly, which is kind of crazy to me, looking back now at this point especially. But this idea that I'm gay, it was never an idea, honestly. Not until, honestly, about a year after my mission.
Did you tell anybody about just your attraction to men before your mission? And were you just, because I'm assuming you were just hearing this narrative at times about homosexual people are possessed by a spirit, mm-hmm. without actually sharing with people that you had same-sex attraction or whatever label you're taking on.
Sure. At the time, to be totally honest, I don't remember that exactly. I believe that it had come up with my parents early on in my high school years, and I think that it was a conversation that kind of came up specifically that I opened up with my parents about a year or so after my mission, after getting home from my mission, where I told my mom that I'm attracted to men and I don't know what that means, and I think I might also be attracted to women, so don't worry about it, was the message at that point in time. And it just kind of it went quiet, I guess, for a while there with my parents. So
tell our listeners where you went on your mission.
Yeah, so I went to Brazil, had a wonderful time. I think that, I know a lot of people in my position who have kind of stepped away from the church, who also served a mission, may have more negative feelings or different things like that. But for me, it was a wonderful time in my life to learn a lot about myself and to also serve other people and to learn about myself through serving. Just so many wonderful opportunities, I would say, to experience a different culture, to meet people and live with them through their trials and through their experiences, and to be able to just be with them. And I think that there were traits and attributes that I was able to learn on my mission that I'm extremely grateful for, even at this stage of my life.
Thanks for serving a mission.
Yeah.
You know, it's a big deal what you did. You gave 2 years of your life to help people to come into Christ through our restored church, and learned a new language and went to a different culture. And there were probably some hard days. The further I get away from my mission, I think the less I remember those days.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for serving a mission.
Yeah, I talk about this a lot with friends and coworkers and everyone, that I have this maybe blessing and curse that I don't really remember bad things all that well. I tend to look back on experiences and whatnot with very, very, I can't even remember the expression, but very, very happy moments and happy memories. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that I do. I have a hard time remembering the bad parts of things. So,
why did you tell your mom?
I just remember I was in St. George visiting. I had already moved up to northern Utah after my mission. Honestly, within a few weeks of returning home, I started working up here. And I remember coming home and just being anxious and feeling very upset. My mom could tell that I was quite upset, and it just sort of came out. I just sort of sprung it on her. I wasn't even planning or to talk about it at all. It was just sort of in the moment that it happened. And what's funny is there's not much more to that kind of came out of that conversation. It was just sort of like, okay, like, cool, you know, we can continue, you know, if you ever need anything, if you need to talk about this or whatever, just kind of let me know. But it kind of honestly went silent after that point. So, do
you wish it hadn't gone silent? Or was that okay for you and your parents were just taking a cue from you, wondering if you wanted to talk about it?
I think that at that point, especially as we get a little bit further into my story, maybe it'll become clearer, but I don't know if we were ready to talk about that. I think that both my parents and myself went through a lot of growth over those next couple of years of understanding all of those dynamics, whether it was me being gay or just what does that mean for our family and all of those things. I think that time was important to have, actually. And so maybe coming back to that idea of I don't really look back on things with bad memories. It seems okay now, even in retrospect, that's how that worked out.
Do you know why you were unsettled, or when you got home from your mission, what your mom picked up? What was going on within you that led to just talking about it?
You and I actually, I think, talked about this when we chatted about 2 years ago, this time actually, where I talked about on my mission how I had very little anxiety around my attraction to men on my mission. And it was almost completely out of my mind, honestly, during those 2 years. And it was very wild. It was a very wild experience for me, because coming home, it was almost as if like it all came back at once, like this emotion of it all. And when we talked about it, you actually gave me this idea of, I can't remember where you had this, I think you had this conversation with someone else, but this idea that your mission is the first time where you've had male companionship, almost 24/7. And it's a chance for you to almost, have that experience of being with someone and having a unified goal and working towards someone, almost like you would in a committed relationship, emotional relationship with someone. And so maybe for the first time in my life, those needs were being met, at least on like a relationship level of being with someone and having a companion on my mission. So I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. But getting back to your question, I think it was just that. I think it was kind of the stress of me starting to realize this isn't something that's changing. This isn't something that's going away. And I don't really know what all this means. And I haven't talked about it. I want to talk about it with someone, and I trust my mom, and I want to have this conversation with her. So
trust your mom. How cool is it you talk to your mom?
Yeah. Wonderful person.
If mom's listening, great job, Mom, just to create some sort of feeling about you that Jacob is safe talking to you. That's a pretty heavy secret to keep, and that's a payday for a parent, even though it leads to a lot of questions. It's a great payday for a parent when a kid comes out to them. Yeah, as I ask return missionaries that question, I get a lot of different answers, but one of the general answers I get is the brotherhood that missionaries, or sisterhood, if you're a gay sister missionary, feel as you're working together for a higher cause. And there's just, it's kind of all those things that often it's the least triggering time, and no one's dating, no one's talking about dating. You don't have to sort of address how the dating world's going to go or not go. And so and I give that advice. Sometimes I get calls from missionaries that are thinking about a mission, men or women pre-mission, and they wonder, well, wait a second, how can I do this? I'm going to be living with someone of the same sex 24/7. That could get awkward. And most, like you, have reported to me, it never did get awkward. It was just this really wonderful time of serving, bringing people to Christ through our church. And it was just this higher team effort that just created a lot of natural connection for a higher goal. That doesn't happen every time. Some have reported to me they had a crush and fell in love with a companion, and that doesn't mean that then they were inappropriate. They just had to manage that. And I think that's something that
it's fine for people to have happy crushes.
You should not serve a mission because that might happen to you. I would just advise you to take that situation when it happens, and you'll know what to do.
Straight missionaries have crushes as well.
There you go. I think we talk about that on the mission. So keep telling your story. So you come out to your mom, and then it's kind of okay. You don't talk a lot about it.
Yeah. What's interesting is around that time, too, I had a sibling who was starting to leave the church, as well as some uncles and aunts who were starting to leave the church. And I myself had started to have a bit of a faith crisis myself of starting to not understand a lot of aspects of my religion. And at that point in time as well, it wasn't super connected to me being gay. It was very much related to my faith and my spirituality. And I would say that around that time as well, I had a conversation with my mom where we talked about spirituality and religion. And I asked her, how do you reconcile some of these things that just don't necessarily make sense? And for her, the answer was, my place is not to worry about the church at large, but to participate and to be in my community and to serve and to love God and to do what I can to bring others unto Christ among the people that I'm around. And for me, that was enough at that point to start that journey of me separating my religion from my personal relationship with my heavenly parents. And so that was sort of a stepping stone for me that I think helped me to navigate my life kind of from that point on, in all honesty.
How did you resolve that you're not possessed by an evil spirit? Or do you still believe that?
I don't believe that. Just to get that out there. That is not a belief that I hold at this point. Or don't think that I ever will again. So yeah, I don't know exactly. I think that it was a progression for me. It was from that point, about a year after my mission, it was 2 years before I ever went out with a guy or kissed a guy. The first time I kissed a guy was in June of 2017. And that was about 2 years from that point that I talked to my mom. And I would say that throughout that whole time and that progression was me kind of working to understand this and trying to figure out, is this me? Is this not me? Can this go away? Will this go away ever? And I would say that I finally just came to a point after a number of conversations that I had where I realized this is me. And I would almost say it was, some type of spiritual confirmation for me that this is me and that I don't have to worry about this, that I can navigate this myself because it's okay.
Did you ever ask God why you're gay?
Yes, but I'd like to talk about that in a little bit. So
then let's keep this in
order. We will get there.
Good.
So in 2017, that was when things started to change for me. looking back through my notes, it was funny. It was definitely on my mind at that point in time. I found a note in my phone actually I was driving to work, and I think I had read this article earlier that day about LGBTQ youth suicides growing in Utah and how bad it really was and continuing to get here in Utah. And I just had this overwhelming emotion, even though at that point I don't even know if I was still in a place of accepting myself as gay, that I wanted to help and that I wanted to do something about that it didn't feel right and that something had to change and get better. And so then, that was in like March-ish, and time is going on. And in June, I had this moment where I just told myself, I have to do this. Like, I need to go out with a guy and go on a date and probably kiss him and figure this out for myself. And so I did, and I went into the experience completely intending for it to push me back, to push me and help me feel like this is bad and terrible and not something that is okay for me to do. And that it would push me back almost into the church and into this safe place, almost like this comfortable place, I guess I would say. Even though it was so painful, it was comfortable at the time because it was what I had known all the way up to that point.
And you're active in your YSA ward? Not
very active. I'm Elders Quorum president at this point, actually, in my ward, and actively talking to my bishop, actually, about all of this. And so that experience happened. I go out with this guy, and I get home afterwards, and actually, no, I think I got in my car afterwards, and I just had this moment where I was like, I feel fine. In fact, I feel comfortable and safe. And for the first time in my life, like, I get it. I get this like idea that like all of my friends all through high school and all through, my time in Provo for like those like few years after coming home from my mission, of my friends starting to date girls and like have like all these experiences. It was like the first time where I was like, I get what they're talking about. And it was incredible, but it was terrifying at the same time because I realized I have to deal with this. This isn't something that's just going to go away. I'm never going to be able to forget this feeling of what it was like to have some type of a more romantic, maybe even sexual connection with another person that up to this point I've never had. And it was that moment where I just said, I have to deal with this, and I'm going to, and I'm going to figure out what it means.
What would you say that, I'm thinking what I would say to you as your YSA bishop, because I think of that still. And if I had men and women like you that were trying to figure out their life, and what would be the best things I could say, do you feel like you were being deceived by Satan?
No. I would definitely say that I have had points in my life where I have felt the love of a higher power that I like to believe is the love of my heavenly parents. And I have felt that. I felt that in that moment, I would say, and especially in moments that I'll talk about in a minute. And I think that there are still many moments, even today in my life, where I have that confirmation that this is a not just fine, but right and great life for me to lead.
I like you telling your story, and I just recognize we're in a space where it's kind of unreconcilable. And so I just honor your personal journey and your personal experiences and the feelings you have about your future. I had one young man tell me that when he kissed a guy, he went and told his bishop he kissed a guy, and the bishop looked away in disgust. Mm-hmm. And that was the last time he ever talked to his bishop. And so
what was funny is I went and talked to my bishop, and while we had some interesting conversations, I would actually say overall he was still extremely loving and, wanting to help. And while his methods of helping and trying to figure out what to do for me may not have been what ended up working out, his desire to be there.
He did not
and
turn
to
away
help,
and discuss that.
No.
Good.
Yeah.
And I like that you felt safe enough with your priesthood leader that you were talking to your priesthood leader about what's going on in your life.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's the case in a lot of situations, and it makes me sad to hear when that I know a lot of gay people who have not had positive experiences, in working with their priesthood leadership or their YSA leaders, and that makes me really sad, honestly, and I think that you can relate a lot to that, and so my hope is that can continue to get better, and that there will be more and more people who, as they talk to gay people and as they bring more LGBTQ people into their life, that they will start to just understand and hopefully see God within them in a lot of ways.
That's great. Keep telling your story.
Great. So that was in June. And shortly thereafter, I met a guy that, I dated briefly, and it was just a wonderful experience. And so while this first experience that I discussed was, just kind of going out on a date and whatnot, and it was leaving and having this sort of remarkable experience, I then very soon thereafter met this other guy that I dated for probably 4 to 6 weeks. Excuse me. And we had a great time. And it was the first time in my life that I started to feel more of those romantic feelings for someone, and have a lot of those experiences that I kind of talked about earlier that all of my friends were having, of starting to date and have just these fun dating experiences with people. So a few months go by. That's the point where my parents find out that I am dating a guy. Those conversations didn't go well, I would say. And I don't hold any of that against. I hope that's a common theme throughout this, is that I hold everyone in my life up to this point that I've talked about in very high esteem, and acknowledge that people have their faults and they're working through things just as much as I am. But so I had some very hard conversation with my parents over the phone, and a few weeks after that, I went to Lake Powell with my family. The guy didn't come with, it was just me with my family. And I had a conversation with my parents that was very difficult, to say the least. It was probably a 3-hour argument and discussion, heated discussion about this, my sexuality, my life up to this point, and what all this means. And me having only experienced this from sort of the fun, exciting realization standpoint, and not necessarily having had conviction about all of it yet, the conversation with my parents ended with them sort of giving me 4 kind of main points, I guess, that were, you'll never be able to reconcile a lot of these things, including your career. It will hurt your career into the future, you being an openly gay man. You personally, Jacob, will distance yourself from friends and from family. You'll never be able to have the family that you wanted with kids and in a committed, loving relationship. And the last point was that you'll never be able to reconcile things with God. And that hit me hard. That was right at the end of the trip, and I walked out to my car, took my things, walked out to my car, and cried for probably the first 3 hours of my drive home back to Salt Lake. And that sucked, maybe to say the least. But basically what I left them with was, okay, fine. I will give this another shot. I will try and date girls. I will go back to church. I will end this relationship that I'm having right now with this guy, and I will try and figure this out, because I value my relationship with you, and I value these other things, and I don't know how I'll be able to deal with all of these things. I don't know what that means. And it was also kind of sprung upon me. And so I went back and kind of started over in a way. And so I get home. Within about a week, I end things with the guy that I was seeing, and I try to date girls again. And it didn't work. And not that that was surprising to me, I guess, at that point. But it was very affirming, I would say. It really set in stone that this probably wasn't going to work. And I wasn't really sure what to do. And so I decided to start talking to people, because I really wanted to reconcile those things that they threw at me. And I wanted to figure out what all that meant. And so I talked to a lot of people, and I won't name names, but I probably talked to 10 to 15 different individuals who, whether they were parents of gay kids or people in mixed orientation marriages, or gay men who had previously been members but now were in loving, committed relationships. I tried to just reach out to as many people as I could find. And luckily, all of them were actually super, super gracious and willing to talk to me, which was wonderful.
Cool.
And I'm super, super grateful to this day for all of them. I have some of them just written down right here, but they helped me to see that there is a healthy, happy life after coming out. And I think that that was the thing that I needed to hear. I needed to see experiences of people and hear about their journeys and understand what they were going through. And so I actually talked to a mixed orientation couple, and the guy, we had a wonderful conversation about his coming out experience and his wife being so supportive and loving and whatnot. And she eventually hopped on the call with us and joined and conversed with us as well. And it was a wonderful call. But there's one thing that stuck out to me in that conversation that still to this day just sticks with me so much, that going into a mixed orientation marriage, neither party understands what they're consenting to. And I think that it's in a lot of ways unfair to both partners to understand that, like, you may never have a lot of the aspects of a healthy, happy marriage in this situation. And it absolutely can work for people. And I don't necessarily want to knock people who are in that situation and who have gone down that path. But that was her point, is that her being in this situation, being in this marriage, that she essentially said, there's no way I could have ever known what I was consenting to when I first got married. And it was very eye-opening. It was very eye-opening for me. And from that moment on, I realized that that was not going to be a path for me. And I needed to now kind of go from there. So at that point, I started to explore, then my conversations with gay men and who were in relationships and whatnot started to happen. And I started to understand their dynamics of, I can be in a healthy, happy relationship with another man. And I can have a family if I want to. I can have kids, and I can, get married and do all of these things that other people get to do. And I started to feel comfort in that, and knowing that that was okay and going to be a good path for me. And I came out at work, and it was an incredible, amazing experience. And Divvy.
How did you come out at work?
Yeah, so I had definitely had a couple of my closer friends at work who I had come out to, and they were all wonderful and great. But I went to my boss, who at the time was Blake Murray, our CEO, and I sat down with him, and he could tell that I was upset and that I was just kind of stressed and whatnot. And he was like, "What's up?" And I had just come back from a trip with my parents, and I sat down and talked to them. I said, I'm gay, and it's been really hard the last few months trying to figure all this out. And he got up, he came around his desk and just hugged me, and it was an absolutely incredible experience. And from that point on, I knew that I had someone in my court at Divvy, and also that I would be perfectly fine in my working life from that point on, that I would be able to find organizations and companies and people who loved and supported me and didn't care about my sexuality, that it wasn't important or made a difference to them. And from that point on, Divvy became an incredible place. It was before, but I realized that it was an incredible place to work for LGBTQ people. And since then, I think it's only gotten better. And I've had multiple people throughout my time working there who have started working and ultimately came out to me, just let me know how grateful they are that Divvy is such a safe place to work. And I am truly grateful to the people around me who have made that possible at Divvy, because I really do think that it's a special place to work, especially for LGBTQ people.
How did Blake know how to do that?
I don't know. I think that he's a dad himself. I think that he just can tell, and I think he's thought a lot about it, honestly. And I think that it was something that he just knew that loving first was the first and most important thing. So,
yeah, for some reason that put tears in my eyes. Just you we've never really talked about employer situations, but here you are at a good company, feeling impressed to tell the CEO of the company about you being gay. And we're in Utah. And I maybe I have tears in my eyes because I wonder if I could have done what Blake did, 10, 20, 30 years ago. I could do that now. But, if someone came out, the guys and a couple guys in my ward that came out, I don't know if I got up from the bishop's desk and ran around and hugged them. And the courage it took to tell that, and how healing it was just to say, I love you, man, and give you a hug.
Yeah.
And how are the active LDS men and women in your company responding to you being openly gay?
Great. I don't think it's really... I don't think about it. I regularly talk about dates that I go on and, people that I, think are cute and different things like that with coworkers. And it's fine. It's completely comfortable and normal. And I think that I like to believe that everyone has the ability to bring their authentic selves to work at Divvy, whether it's being active LDS or openly gay or, being openly genderqueer. I think that all of those paths for people are okay and have been safe for people. So it's fun. It's a great thing that I feel very grateful to be a part of.
Keep just sharing the story you want to share.
Yeah, so let me kind of get back to those 4 points.
Okay, good.
Right? Those 4 points being not being able to reconcile my career, not being able to reconcile my relationships with friends and family, reconciling the idea of kind of a traditional family with kids and a committed relationship, and then reconciling my relationship with God. So by this point, I've come out to a lot of my close friends, most of my close friends at this point. I've reconciled these issues at work or this idea at work. And now I am at a place where my friends have been wonderful. All of my siblings have been wonderful and just been absolutely supportive and very great. And the thing that I need to reconcile is my relationship with God. And I remember going, and up to that point, I had always gone in prayer and asked, what is the path for me? What do I need to do, right? What path should I choose? Help me just to pick. And for the first time, I went with a question that was, can I continue to progress spiritually and maintain a healthy, progressing relationship with my heavenly parents and be openly gay and in a relationship with a man and ultimately be married and have kids? And can I live that life and continue to maintain a level of spirituality and relationship with my heavenly parents? And for the first time in having that type of discussion in prayer, I had an immediate confirmation that that was great, not just okay, but perfect for me. And that was the moment where everything was different, where from that point on, I knew that this was going to be okay. And that no matter what challenge, or like, my confidence was immediately solidified in my coming out and knowing that I would be an open gay man from that point on. Because I had that confirmation that I believed to be from my heavenly parents. And so from that point, I had done it all. I had reconciled the 4 things. And the only thing that I hadn't reconciled was my parents. And so I went down to St. George for Thanksgiving. I'm actually looking back at our Twitter DM date stamps. That was right before we talked right before I went and chatted with my parents. And so I got down to St. George, and it was maybe, I can't even remember, sometime during Thanksgiving break. And I went and sat down with my mom, just my mom at that point. And I told her, I said, Mom, I've reconciled all these things. I said, you gave me sort of 4 things that I would need to reconcile in all of this and choose, and that I would be choosing. My friends and family are not going to distance themselves from me. I'm going to be perfectly fine at work. And I have confirmation that this isn't a great path for me in terms of my spirituality. The only thing that I haven't reconciled is my relationship with you and Dad. And if that's going to change, it will be on you guys and not me. And immediately my mom said, okay, great, we'll figure this out. And she got up and she hugged me, and it was perfect. And I think that over those months, I think that, you know, we have to give people the benefit of the doubt and a little bit of slack, because, you know, I had been processing this for 24 years at this point. My mom has had, you know, a few months basically to be understanding and trying to figure out what all this means. And so I don't hold that against her or my dad as they've been navigating this. And today they are absolutely wonderful, just my biggest cheerleaders and supporters. And they have gone through their own personal journeys of coming to understand this. And while I don't know exactly where they're at on a lot of these things, I know that they love me, and that they love me for who I am, and that this does not change anything in terms of our relationship and our family, and that they are here to support me and do whatever it takes to ensure that we are close and that we have these familial relations. And whether that means bringing guys home and letting them meet them, or, you know, telling them about dates. My mom constantly calls and asks me about, you know, have you been on any dates? And we talk about my relationships, and we get into all of that. And I've had great conversations even with my dad, where as he's been growing and progressing and understanding more of this, he's called me and had conversations about insights that he's had as he's been coming to understand more about being gay and everything related to it, I guess. And it's just great now. And so I guess, like, it was really bad there for a minute, but in the end, it as cliche as this phrase is, it got better. It really did. And it took some time. And my mom and I remember those first few months after that Thanksgiving, those conversations were hard. And we just kept talking, though. Like, we kept the conversation lines open throughout all of that time, because I didn't want it to be weird. I didn't want it to be uncomfortable. I didn't want it to be a topic that we didn't talk about. And eventually we got to a place now where it is fine and comfortable and a regular topic of conversation. And she tells she's currently going to school to become a family and sex therapist now. And she's told me about her experiences in gender and sexuality studies classes that she's had, and just her own personal growth and understanding of a lot of this. And so I think that it's really, really important, if you can, to keep those lines of conversation open for as long as possible.
It's a great story. If your parents are listening, great job, parents. I have sons your age and daughters your age, and I think one of the things that I would go through as I've talked to other parents is just this grieving process, that what you hope for your son or daughter is not what's going to happen. And I think there's stages of grief as you're talking about your own parents have to go through and just to learn and grow. And you've been processing this for a long time and as a parent. So those parents that are listening, I think what Jacob is sharing is wonderful, but be patient with yourself. And it takes some time to sort of go through the stages of grief. Not that you're sad or disappointed in your kid. It's changing expectations. And yeah, you worry as an active LDS parent what this means for your son or daughter's eternal plan. And I don't know what your parents would say at this point, but I think you just have to leave that at the Savior and say, these Jacob's Heavenly Father's son. And if we really, so you're off the covenant path and you're living outside the doctrine of our church. And I, as a parent, would worry about that. But I, as a parent, would say at the end of the day, my son and daughter have to chart their own path, and my job is to honor that choice they make. And what I can do, what I can control as a parent, is I can keep the family circle together. And that is part of our doctrine, is the importance of strong families. So then I'm thinking, if I'm Jacob's mom or dad and he's talking to me about the men he's dating, he's going to make more thoughtful decisions if he feels like he can have those conversations with me, even though it's not what I expected, the conversations I'd be having. Because I would want, as a parent, if this is the reality of our situation, for you to make really thoughtful decisions. And if I cut you off, the pain of that may cause you to make really unthoughtful decisions. Sometimes I talk about there's a lot of ways to live life off the covenant path. It's kind of a weird thing to say, but I look at some of the people from my high school and the roads that were open to them, and they were pretty difficult roads if you wanted to go down the road that you were considering. And it led to some really difficult outcomes. And a lot of that was to mute the pain they felt by turning to drugs and alcohol, and just ways to mute the pain they felt about the difficulty of their situation. And I look at you and where you are and the kind of experience you're having at your company and the way your friends or family are responding, and I'm grateful for that. Thoughts on that, what I've said?
Yeah.
Or just keep telling your story.
No, you're fine. I think that this world that I like to call just this very nuanced world of being in the gray almost. And Brene Brown actually has a book called Braving the Wilderness. It's one of my favorites. And for me, it kind of opened up this world of realizing that I don't have to be stereotypical Mormon or, member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, nor do I have to be stereotypical gay in a lot of ways, right? And I can figure out what it means for me to navigate both my spirituality and sexuality together in a way that is healthy and brings me joy. And that's ultimately my goal. And that is very nuanced. It means that sometimes I go to church and I really enjoy myself and I get to have conversations that are uplifting and whatnot. And other times it means that I will go out with friends and I might drink or do different things. But ultimately for me, my goal is to find moderation and to find a place where I can be at peace, where I can find inspiration, and where I can continue to feel like I am growing and progressing. And there are times where a pendulum swings, and I have to sort of navigate that for myself and figure out what that means for me to be balanced and to be happy and have a state of homeostasis, I would say. And it's not a clear-cut path for me. And I think that that's what a lot of people have to figure out and navigate in a lot of ways.
I like that. When I meet with somebody that feels their path is to step away, that's not a podcast situation, just a one-on-one visit, I invite everybody to stay, as I've said a few times, but then I do have this pragmatic discussion of, okay, if you feel your path is to step away, my next goal with somebody, if they're going to step away, is to keep a relationship with heavenly parents. And for some, that's kind of conflicting because their relationship with Heavenly Father and is somehow connected through the church. And like you do, and I think Heavenly Father does for all of his children around the world, no matter what faith they're in, they can have a personal relationship with Heavenly Father and receive a personal relationship for their life. And so those listeners that have stepped away or now feel that they're outside of God's love, or please don't do that. You've got to keep God in your life, and he loves you. And if you've made mistakes and feel unworthy and you say, well, he doesn't love me now, don't do that. I think worth is something that's not conditional. Everybody, as a beloved child of Heavenly Father, has worth. And that by that divine nature, stay close to heavenly parents. And I'm glad you've done that, Jacob, because if I'm your father or your mother, I can't be your mother. If I'm one of your parents, that's what I would want. I'd say, well, the reality is this situation, Jacob's going to make better decisions in his life if he's close with his heavenly parents. And then I'd sometimes have this discussion, what can you take with you if you feel your place is to step away? Can you continue to read scriptures? Can you continue to attend church like you're doing?
And I think that at that point, it's just important to figure out what allows you to stay in a healthy state of mind, what allows you to find peace within yourself. And if you find that there are aspects that have brought you pain and whatnot, to piece through those. I don't believe in throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but I do believe that you need to be thoughtful and go through and figure out which aspects are healthy for me and going to allow me to be in a positive state of mind, and not put me in an anxious state of life, but rather bring me peace and joy. And I think that that's a very long and thoughtful and time-consuming and sometimes awkward and unsure process. But in the end, I think that it ends up bringing more joy than the alternative.
One of the challenging things always for me is your personal revelation not matching the doctrine of our church.
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. I think that it's a very complex situation to be in. And kind of like I talked about with my mom earlier in that discussion of how do I reconcile all of these things that don't necessarily make sense to me, things that I've grown up with and been taught for years. How do I reconcile these things? And ultimately, the thing that matters most for me is that relationship with God. And so it's not perfect. It's not clear cut. But for me, that doesn't change my personal relationship with God. And maybe in a lot of ways, that's why I've stepped away from the church and why I don't necessarily am active in participating, because I don't feel like at this point in time that there is a place for me to be there and to be with people and to be participating. And so it's a hard place to be in all honesty, because I don't love conflict. But I want there to, especially for the people who are growing up in the church right now, the youth who are growing up in the church right now and trying to navigate this world of being LGBTQ, I want there to be space for them in the plan of salvation. And I want there to be space for them in the doctrine of the church and in the gospel, because I believe that love does extend to them. And I believe that there is clarity because I personally found that. And so it's hard for me because you're right in that for me, those don't match up. I think if anything, I want that to match up, at least for the people who are going through the similar situations that I was 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago.
It's a good answer, and it's a complicated question, and we like to talk about complicated stuff as best we can on this podcast, and I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I could say things that, but I just have chosen that my personal revelation doesn't give me the ability to judge your personal revelation. And my personal revelation, was, but I've never walked your road.
Yeah.
I've never faced, 60 years of being alone. I've never faced the issues you've faced and had to ask the questions you've been asking and to go deep and sort of figure out your future. So what do? Is I look at the doctrine that Christ taught as to love my neighbor as myself. Charity never faileth. And I just don't know that I'm giving up any doctrine that I believe in by just saying, I'll support you in what you think is best.
Mm-hmm. And I think that love is the most important thing of all, right? We're commanded over all else to love God and to love our neighbor. And I think that is the thing that, if anything, to not leave behind is to figure out how you can best do that in whatever state you're in.
And I think you're very thoughtful for other LGBTQ people. Some, will take a path like your path and want everybody to follow the same path. And I love what you said about mixed orientation marriages, and I'm glad you talked to somebody. And I think the most thoughtful LGBTQ people, and there's a lot like you, are, and tell me if you're saying this, I think you're saying this is my personal revelation from my path, but if somebody else feels they can stay celibate, somebody else feels they can do a mixed orientation marriage, mm-hmm. I'm not going to be threatened by that or feel like everybody's got to take my path to sort of justify my path. I can sort of see the beauty of their path and their personal revelation and hope that those paths succeed for them. Is that okay with you? And
for me, at least, I totally agree with you. And I would also add that some people may stop believing in God. And some people may, find themselves in a different state of belief than even those. And that's okay. That's their journey, I think. And above all, our command is to love them, right? And as much as I can't expect people to understand the journey that I've been through, my only ask is that they respect the situation that I'm in and the feelings and experiences that I've had, even if they can't necessarily understand that path. And so I would extend that to everyone who is in this situation, or whether they're gay or not, or LGBTQ or not. I want everyone to be able to feel like, that their path is respected. It may not be in line with something that I believe or something that I think is the right way to do something, but that I want to respect the path that they're going to take. So
I love that. Other things you want to share? And I don't know if you answered the question. Have you ever asked Heavenly Father why you're gay? Maybe you answered that.
I haven't. Well, maybe I don't know. I don't know if I think about it that often.
It's okay.
Just because I think that for me, when I received the confirmation, I obviously, all growing up, I constantly asked myself, especially in prayer, Heavenly Father, why am I attracted to men? What is this thing that I'm dealing with? Like, what is going on? And, I don't think I ever really got clear answers on that. But I didn't, when I had that experience of just being at peace with who I am, I didn't really need that question answered after that point, because it didn't really matter.
It's good. Other things you'd like to share, Jacob?
I think that's mostly it. my life today is a life of nuance, I would say. And it's not perfect, and I still have so much to learn and to figure out. And, you know, at some point I would love to be in a committed relationship with another man and have a family and you know, follow that path for myself. But that's still, you know, not in any of my short-term future at this point. And so there's a lot to navigate there still, and a lot to figure out. And I think that my personal goal is to consistently check in with myself and to make sure that I'm in a good place, and that if I need to lean more on and be more introspective, then I will. And if I need to be putting myself out there a little bit more and going on more dates and doing that, then I'll do that. Right. And I think that it's just, I want to take life in a way that I'm regularly just sort of, checking in with myself and continuing to progress. 'Cause that's ultimately the goal that I have.
It's great. Just touched by your story, Jacob. I'm touched. You are a very mature 26-year-old. One of the themes I felt as I've met with LGBTQ people is a feeling that generally a lot of maturity given the biological age. And someone could do their thesis on this, or whatever that's called when you get you do real complicated work at a graduate level. And I've sensed that's because you've had to go deep, and you haven't been able just to rely on traditional sources, and you've had to go deep to figure out your path, and you've had to spend more time in prayer and pondering. And so I think it's a credit to you and your personality. And I'm going to lose my voice here, and I have no more water in front of me. But I just would want the best for you. I would want, if I'm your parent, I want to stay close with you. And I think what I try to do as a parent and as a YSA bishop, I wanted people to feel they could trust me. Even people that were making choices that were outside the teachings of our church, because I felt like I would just help them continue to make better choices. I could keep the family circle together. I could keep the relationship together. And that didn't mean I sold out my doctrine, what I believed in. I just, allow the reality of your life to be different than my own. Mm-hmm. And unless you're actively working to take down my freedoms, if you're, which I don't see just you moving forward in your life the way you feel is best anyway impacts my straight marriage or the things that I'm trying to accomplish with my family. And so I'm glad you're on the podcast. I'm glad we're learning how to better love. I like where your parents are, and I love that the family circled together. I think that's one of the greatest goals as parents, is if we can keep the family circle together. And that gets hard for active LDS parents if a child chooses to step away because they worry about empty seats at the table in the next life and their eternal family. And one of the reasons our LGBT people get suicidal, we've talked about this on a few podcasts, but one component or factor is if they feel they're messing up their their family's eternal family, or their burden. And so I sense I wouldn't want any LGBTQ LDS youth to feel like if they feel their path is to step away, that they become suicidal because they think they've ruined their eternal family.
Right.
So any other thoughts before we close?
I think that the thing that I would want other individuals to know is to simply, whether you're on the side of being LGBTQ and coming out to your family or friends, or on the side of receiving that information from people in your lives and not being really sure what to do with that, to move forward with patience and love. Because if you can push through and those relationships are real and were based in love and closeness before that point, this new information doesn't have to change that. And you can take the time and have the conversations and seek that understanding to get to a place of even better understanding and really coming to know one another even better than you did before, because you didn't have this information before, and now you do, and you get to know them more wholly. And I think that it's absolutely worth it, because I wouldn't want to trade my familial relations, my relationship with my parents or my siblings or anything for that. But I am also going to live true to myself at this point. And I think that working through that to get to that place where we can be close and have these conversations, and I can continue to be true to myself and my sexuality, that it's such a great place to be on this side, and absolutely worth all the hard conversations and the journey and everything up to this point.
I love that. And I hope you're successful. I want you to be successful. I wish our listeners could see Jacob. He's upbeat, he's positive. You can tell he's just in a great spot with his career, emotionally. And if I'm your parent, that's what I want for, my son or daughter, is to be where you are, and with so much hope for your future of your life, and the feeling that you know your future. And I just leave part of that future at the Savior's feet, and just say my job is to keep your family circle together and keep the communication channel open. I love the word hope. And for those of you that are LGBTQ, if your hopes are different than Jacob's, I think we're both saying that's great. And some of the LGBTQ people I've met that are saying, don't just let me kind of choose my path, and I'm not going to, just honor that. So I think you're in a great spot, and I love what you're doing and just your future. It's the first time we've talked about a Utah employer, Divvy, and how they are creating a culture. To me, it makes your company stronger. If I'm the CEO of Divvy, I'm an owner of a very small 10-person company, so we don't have 300 employees, but I want our company to be successful, and we've always hired the very best talent, and I would want to create a culture where everybody feels welcome, so that they can all bring their very best talents together for the success of the company. So if I'm Blake, if that's his first name, I'm running a company that's growing rapidly in the high-tech sector of Utah, I want people like you on my team. And that's why I love that, the culture that's present in your company. And to me, that's not society going in the wrong way. It's society going in the right way, so that you can fully contribute. And so, yeah, I believe we're in the last days, and Satan's real and wants to destroy us, but I don't look at what's happening at Divvy as part of that. I don't look at how your parents are keeping the family circle together by not ostracizing you. To me, that's an improvement of society. Satan is real and wants to destroy us. He wants to tear the family apart. But to me, he does that by, if I'm your parents, sending you out of the family and cutting you off and sending you to the streets because you've chosen this path. To me, that's what Satan wants to do, is divide our families that way. So if your parents are listening and other parents, I think what, Jacob's parents are doing is what Satan doesn't want us to do, is by keeping the family circle, so Jacob makes better decisions and feels his family's support and love as he moves his way forward. You okay with all that?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're trying to do podcasts in an hour these days. We're at an hour and 10 minutes, so that's an improvement.
Yeah.
And Jacob came really prepared with notes on his phone. Didn't surprise me, just the kind of man he is. And Jacob, thanks for being my friend. Thanks for things I learned today from you, and just where you're going in life. And you have a great life ahead of you. And thank our listeners for joining us on another episode of Listen, Learn, and Love, hosted by Richard Osler.